Welcome to Ready Layer 2 with me, Get.Small. This is a podcast for the founders, innovators, and experimenters building the future of Web3 on Arbitrum. Hey everybody, Get.Small here for the Ready Layer 2 podcast. Really excited to welcome back my very first return guest to the show, Alec Shaw. Welcome back to the Ready Layer 2 podcast.
Great to see you again, Git.
Absolutely. You were one of the very first people to respond when I let the word out that I was going to be doing this and support me and come on and do an interview with SpareX. I'll link that up down below if anybody's interested in it. But when I found out you were working on something new here, I wanted to do my best to return the favor. I appreciate that early support, so thank you for that. And I'm really excited to have you back. We're going to be talking about Tenderize.me, new project you're working on in the Liqud Staking space. Before we get into that, please just let the listener know a little bit about your background. What do you do in crypto and how did you end up at Tenderize?
Yeah, happy to. So first off, thank you so much for having me again. Very excited to do this talk. So as you mentioned, my previous project was SpareX. It is a auto-yielding stablecoin, and we launched that on Arbitrum in late 2021. So we were one of the first projects to break into the Arbitrum DeFi ecosystem. That project went pretty well. We got up to around 32 million TVL. It still operates today. And most recently, the governance token SPA was listed on Coinbase. So
nice.
A couple big wins with that project. Very excited how that's going. We're still working on finding perfect product market fit, but you can still go use that protocol today. It's alive and well over on the Arbitrum network. And my role there was growth. So I was tasked with creating on-chain incentives, ensuring we had healthy liquidity on-chain, and doing a lot of the tokenomics for the SpareX DAO. And I'm using a lot of those skills I acquired to help with the version 2 launch of Tenderize, which we'll get into, and ultimately the launch of the governance token called Wagyu. So I'm very much so an on-chain DeFi degen guy, not a TradFi individual.
Awesome. Thanks for that. And again, we're going to be talking about Liqud Staking. That's the space you're in now. So I want to set the stage for the listener there. Let's not assume that everybody knows what we're talking about. Can you give that 101 description of what is Liqud Staking?
Yeah, for sure. In proof of stake networks, there is an opportunity for individuals to stake the native token. For example, in Ethereum, that is staking the ETH asset. In the Polygon ecosystem, that is staking the Matic asset. And this provides a very important service to the blockchain. And what it does is it provides security. So the more capital that is staked, you can assume that there's more security that is being contributed to that blockchain. So a lot of these chains prioritize getting more stake to be locked into these staking contracts. And as you provide economic security for that blockchain, the blockchain will actually effectively pay you for this service. So you lock your token and you begin to earn an interest rate. So the two very important words there are, one, the interest rate. So you get rewards for staking. And then second is the term staking. So you're actually locking up your asset in the staking process. But now there's a new flavor of protocols that live on top of the staking infrastructure. And this is still 100% on the blockchain. But what you can do in a Liqud staking protocol is stake your asset. You'll begin to earn those rewards that we mentioned before, but it's not locked up. So what that means is you can hold a token which represents your staked assets. It will go up in value as you accrue rewards from the staking interest rate. But instead of that asset being locked, you can swap that asset. You can use it as collateral in various DeFi applications. So specifically, the term liquidity, Liqud staked tokens, references the liquidity that you get, which is the ability to either sell the token instantly and unlock your stake, or you can use it as collateral in DeFi applications to take a loan, for example.
Right on. So it gives you the opportunity to have the best of both worlds. Because before liquid staking, if I stake something, I'm getting paid to give up my liquidity. Now in this model, I'm getting paid to give up my liquidity, but then I'm getting it back in another form. And those might trade at a little bit of a discount to the underlying staked asset. So there's a little bit of a spread there, but I'm not locked in. I can trade it. Like you said, I can still use this collateral, but I'm still earning that additional interest payment on it, if you will. What's the downside here, right? Because it ain't nothing's 100% good, and there's no free lunch. So what am I giving up, or what additional risk am I taking on?
There are a couple different ways in which you can deliver this holy grail experience, which is earning your staking rewards simultaneously getting liquidity on it. And in the current approach, there's a significant trade off when it comes to the way in which these liquid staking protocols are designed. And the main trade off that most solutions are sacrificing is the decentralization of the stake. So I'll get into the details as to why this phenomenon happens later on. But the easiest way to deliver liquidity, which would be with one liquid staked token, and you create a trading pool on Uniswap, sacrificing decentralization and adopting the liquidity. But the Tenderize approach is focusing on delivering that liquidity, but in such a way that doesn't centralize stake on the underlying network. And I'll pause there and I won't get into the problems of how that actually happens yet, but that's currently the biggest trade off.
Got it.
There's tremendous interest in liquid staking, but the result of the current liquid staking solutions, like Lido, for example, it results in a small subset of validators managing a very large portion of stake. So Lido is a conglomerate of 29 validators, and they own 32% of all of the staked ETH. So this is an emerging problem where Ethereum may not be as decentralized as everyone wants it to be, simply because people are choosing liquidity of stake and compromising on the decentralization, but it doesn't actually have to be that way.
So basically what's happening with Lido, and that is the biggest example, they have control over that much of the voting power, if you will, on what's going on in Ethereum. And they have an on-chain governance, which is different from what Ethereum has. And the bigger they get, it just puts pressure on that underlying culture and ethos of Ethereum itself and that decentralization aspect. So there's not necessarily like a direct risk to me as an individual investor if I'm staking with a Lido versus something more centralized. But is the concern more about where does this thing go in the long run? That's really what you guys are trying to address here.
Yeah, precisely.
Okay.
Assuming the protocol is safe, that there's not going to be any smart contract exploits, the end
Sure.
users,
Always a risk. Yep.
yeah, the end users totally happy. The implication of them using that, though, is that the underlying network does become centralized. There's one additional trade-off that users are subjected to when using a solution like Lido. So Lido has their own pre-approved whitelist of validators. So what that means is as you mint a staked ETH and ETH goes into the Lido smart contracts, Lido determines which of those validators are ultimately going to receive the stake, and the end user is holding one asset that is actually more of a yield aggregation of all of the underlying validators. So what this means for the end user is if one of those validators isn't performing up to par, that means the reward rate or the interest rate on that liquid stake token, it's going to fall. So users currently can't isolate their risk to the validator that they like. They're subject to this aggregated yield system. And that doesn't have to be, users don't have to subject themselves to that risk either.
Right on. Yeah. And then pluses and minuses of that are one, if there basically you're spreading that risk out across 29, right? So if you picked one and that one got hammered, then you would take all of that slashing effect as opposed to 1/29th of it. I'm sure I'm way oversimplifying. But on the flip side of that too is if one of them is performing really well and returning great rewards, you're not going to take all of those rewards. You're going to split those evenly across too. So it's like insurance almost, where you're spreading that risk out amongst a population of people, but you're also spreading that upside benefit out too potentially. So I think that's a great setup, good enough for our purposes, right? Because what we were talking about here is about building and launching protocols. Wanted to make sure we had that context set for Liqud Staking. If the listener's interested, there's a ton of stuff out there on Liqud Staking. I'll see if I can link some stuff up in the show notes down below for you, but we'll say that's good enough for today. With Tenderize now, so Tenderize exists to address this problem of increasing centralization on the Ethereum network. Is the founding purpose of Tenderize really just that, like to create this service that prevents the centralization vector from expanding? Is that the sole reason, or are there other things that Tenderize is trying to accomplish?
Two things. So first off, we want to activate Liqud Staking for longer tail assets. For example, Matic and Polygon, LPT, which is the decentralized live streaming infrastructure, as well as the Graph, the infrastructure that powers almost all DeFi applications with their native asset GRT. We are shipping Liqud Staking for all of those long tail assets. So that is the first benefit you get. But then second, there are tremendous amounts of staked assets that are currently neglected from participating in Liqud Staking. So for example, like Liqud, which is a staking service provider for individuals looking to stake Matic. They have $200 million worth of stake. And a lot of users that are saying, we would love Liqud Staking. But Liqud is at a crossroads. So if they want to offer Liqud Staking to their customers, they basically have to direct them to a different Liqud Staking service provider, one that looks a lot like the Lido approach that we just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
So what that means for Liqud is, say hypothetically one of their stakers pulls out $20 million because they would like to Liqud stake their position. The second this user mints their Liqud Staking token, it enters the black hole, which is the Lido infrastructure. There's no guarantee that stake will end up back on Liqud's hardware. So these staking service providers, whose goal is to attract delegations, they don't have the ability to offer Liqud Staking. So that's where Tenderize comes in effectively as a white label Liqud Staking solution for these staking service providers. So big or small, their delegators that are already staked to their hardware can utilize a Liqud staked token and then swap it, collateralize it, do whatever they like to do in DeFi, all while maintaining the stake on the hardware that they were originally staked to. So it's really going to be huge for these stakers that really want Liqud Staking, but currently are staked to a piece of hardware that doesn't offer it.
Got it. And the alternative obviously would be to build out their own solution from the ground up to offer this type of thing, and the minting of the Liqud Stake, and there's a lot to it. We're going to get into all of that. That would be the alternative. So you guys are going to bring this protocol infrastructure to them as an option to integrate into what they already have.
Yep.
Okay.
Precisely.
That's awesome.
And they can brand that however much they would like to be affiliated with that Liqud Stake token is up to them. But the glory of this solution is it's 100% permissionless. So whether or not Liqud wants this, I can delegate my stake to Liqud, and Tenderize will mint a Liqud Stake token specific to Liqud, and that token is already liquid thanks to our new decentralized exchange called TenderSwap. And the glory of it is we don't even need to onboard Liqud. Any validator that's already an honest actor and validating the network is accepted into the Tenderize infrastructure automatically.
Okay.
Any user can delegate right to that hardware.
Got it. Very cool. I like that. That anytime you can open up more permissionless vectors to creating value and adding functionality into your existing platforms and projects, that's awesome. So that'll be a great service. So this is kind of a big deal of a project, right? The scale of what you all are trying to accomplish means big TVL, big dollars coming in. People got to trust you, right? They got to trust that you're going to do what you say you're going to do. They got to trust that you're going to have good code, that your audits are going to be good, that you're not going to put them at heightened risk of contract flaws and hacks and things like that. So this is a big deal, and there's going to be a lot of moving parts to it. So I want to break down what's been the progression to approaching a project of this scale. And I know that you guys started with a V1 release that has already been up and running for some time, is live right now still. And I want to talk about that. So tell us, what was the thinking around V1? How did you shrink the scope of what you were trying to accomplish to prove out some of your concepts? And how did that all go?
Yeah, great question. Thanks for bringing up V1. As mentioned, version 1 has been on mainnet for about 15 months now, and we've attracted around $4 million of TVL at the peak. There's about 1.2 million or so in the protocol today. And this has been a project that is many years in the making, always with the ultimate vision of increasing decentralization. But at first, as you mentioned, we really needed to test out the infrastructure, ensure that we feel comfortable custodying users' deposits, because this is a fully permissionless and open source solution where if there is some sort of exploit, it's just like a DeFi protocol where there won't be much recourse to go and claw back any capital that was lost. So in order to mitigate that risk, we launched version 1, which you can think of as a centralized version of version 2, but it's not centralized in the sense that the Tenderize team is managing stake or anything like that. It's just centralized because it's only linked up to one validator per network. So you might think, what the hell is the purpose of version 1 if it's not decentralized, right? Version 1 was a security proof of concept. So we've been testing these contracts, specifically the contracts that custody users' stake. So the most important one. These are the exact same contracts that are going to be living on version 2 with like extremely minor edits. And all the edits are going to be audited by Hellborn. But long story short, version 1 was a security proof of concept, and it passed with flying colors. These contracts are battle tested, and our partners, as well as us, contributing our own capital to the protocol, we're feeling much more confident about the security of the system. And then with the final audit coming in just a couple of weeks, we feel very confident that we'll have a nice initial TVL, and that initial TVL could help convince additional capital to come into the system. But this is the biggest barrier for Tenderize as well as other DeFi protocols, is simply building out the Lindy Effect, which is how long has the capital been in these contracts, how much capital is in the contracts, and has there ever been an exploit? We've never had an exploit, but our TVL isn't massive, but it has been around for 15 months.
Right.
So it's going to be up to the user to feel comfortable and understand the architecture. And we're going to do more educational sessions, do more podcasting to help the market understand what they're depositing into before they do it. But at the end of the day, we'll take all of the security considerations. We'll make that our number one priority and focus exclusively on the security.
Got it. Okay. So basically it was a large portion, the most important portion of the underlying platform for actually doing the staking, moving things around, minting the T tokens, the liquidity tokens, and just making sure, as you said, you can start to build up a body of proof that you all know what you're doing. Assume all of that stuff was audited and vetted out early on in the project too. So it makes sense to have that first version of the project come out with basically some training wheels so that you can make sure that you're validating the most important parts, but you're taking away some of the variables, right? Like you don't have new validators signing up or coming on or whatever the right terminology is. You're just taking away some of those moving parts so you can focus on the underlying. How did you design your metrics for that, if you will? You said you passed with flying colors. What are the metrics that you all rely on to look at and say, we don't feel good about this. We're looking at data that says this was good and we can move on.
Yeah, so the primary contracts that we were testing were the minting and the redeeming contracts. So this was specifically the contract that would accept users' capital. It would stake that capital to the validator, then mint the liquid staked token representing the principal and the rewards specific to that validator.
Mm-hmm.
All we were monitoring was, look, will the system always maintain a one-to-one outstanding supply of our T token as the liquid stake derivative? And as rewards come through, are these rewards adequately being passed back to the liquid staking token holder? And if there's ever a slashing event, is the slashing event considered in a negative rebase and everything is working as designed? No exploits, no hiccups. Everything is working beautifully. So we're not going to fix what's not broken.
Got it. Largely a big accounting project, right? Then everything checked out right and left and the numbers jived at the end. That was the most important part. And like you said, no exploits along the way. So that's cool. Again, thinking about this from the standpoint of the founder, how did you all decide which tokens to go live with? You mentioned them already. It was Graph GRT, LivePeer's LPT, and there's a third one, right?
Matic.
Okay. So how did you pick those three? Why were those the right ones to go for this pilot project?
Yeah, for sure. So technically speaking, there's a practical purpose, which was the fact that all three of these ecosystems don't have an upper bound of delegations for their validators. So what I mean by that is, if you think about the Ethereum ecosystem for a second, each validator requires specifically 32 ETH. So there's an upper bound. And the implication of that is say Alec wants to delegate to some obscure piece of hardware. I need exactly 32 ETH. So say someone else has 16, I need 16. I can't just select a validator and say, look, I have 1 ETH. I'd like to go mint a liquid stake derivative. If that were the case, what I have to do is I have to wait in queue. So I'm waiting in a line basically until someone spins up hardware, and then my ETH will then be selected and put into the rest of the ETH to fill up the full 32. Because of that constraint, we elected to go with alternatives that didn't have an upper bound on the staking per validator. That is Matic, that is Graph, and that is LivePeer. And the founder of Tenderize and the current CTO is Nico Vergouwen. And Nico was the senior protocol engineer for multiple years at the LivePeer Foundation. So he's deeply familiar with the liquid staking code and the staking contracts because he helped build them. So LivePeer was an obvious low-hanging fruit, and we've been building with the LivePeer Foundation for a couple of years now after receiving a grant. Same goes with the Graph Foundation. So we're huge Graph supporters. Hell, the Graph powers 95% of DeFi dashboards. So as people that are passionate about unstoppable financial applications, we believe that a decentralized Graph network is critical. So the Graph was an obvious choice as well. And we received a grant from them early last year to build out this liquid staking solution. And then finally, we have Matic, which is an incredibly flourishing DeFi ecosystem. And there's a ton of staked capital and not that many liquid staking opportunities. That was a pretty obvious choice to satisfy before the Ethereum iteration gets launched next year.
Got it. Now, both LivePeer and Graph were, I don't know if involved's the right word, but they were aware of and supportive of what you're doing. Was the same true for Matic, or did you guys just do that on your own? Because you said earlier you don't really need permission to go do this from a foundation or whoever. Is that what you did with Polygon?
Yeah, you're exactly right. As mentioned, it's totally permissionless. We don't need their support, but I can't give too many details, but it looks like we will have significant participation from both the LivePeer Foundation or LivePeer Inc., Graph Foundation, as well as Polygon Labs.
Oh, very cool. But it's cool to know that you could, like that as an example of you're able to do it ahead of that support. and then that support becomes gravy effectively. So that's really cool. That's version 1. You guys have been running for 15 months. Everything's checking out. Math is good. Accounting's good. Security's good. You are going to move to V2. What changes? Is it, it's not, I imagine it's not the full vision, right? But it's the next iteration. So what are you adding on to V1? What's coming in V2?
Yeah, great question. So let me answer this in two phases
Mm-hmm.
because there's like a version 2 and then there's like a version 2.5, which we're going to build some solutions on top of it. So let me just start with version 2. So as mentioned before, in the version 1 experience, what you would do is you would go to the Tenderize app with your Matic, let's just say Matic. You'll stake your Matic and you'll receive T-Matic. But in the version 1 experience, the Matic only went to one predetermined validator. So this is good from a liquid staking standpoint, not good from a decentralization standpoint. So how does version 2 differ? Version 2 allows for the user holding Matic to select first which validator they would like to stake to. Say there's a validator that is in a developing country and you want to help distribute stake in such a way that hardware being operated in developing countries gets more stake. That is totally up to you as the end user. You get to decide which hardware it gets staked to, and then the protocol will mint you a liquid staked token that represents specifically the performance of that validator. So that's really where it differentiates. Instead of the Tenderize team deciding where the stake ends up, it's 100% up to the delegator. And then another important part of version 2 is the liquidity component. So just because you have a staked token representation in your wallet does not mean it's necessarily liquid yet. So the second component of TenderSwap version 2, you can think of like a clearinghouse. So this is called TenderSwap. TenderSwap is an on-chain clearinghouse that will accept the liquid staked token, and it will buy your liquid staked token from you and sell you the unstaked asset. So hypothetically, if you have 100 units of staked Matic staked to Git's hardware, that individual can take the 100 Matic, staked Matic that is, and sell it through TenderSwap. There will be a small fee charged depending on how active trades are going through the TenderSwap pool. So that we call that the utilization rate. If the pool is being highly utilized, you'll have to pay more of a fee in order to instantly swap your staked token for the unstaked token. But the most important thing to note here is version 2 will come with an on-chain clearinghouse ready with liquidity. So that means that even the smallest validator can spin up a liquid staked token and then instantly sell that liquid staked token through our shared clearinghouse. Mm-hmm. They don't have to worry about the on-chain liquidity incentives or financing or figuring out how to make an on-chain market for their asset. They can outsource that expense to Tenderize and simply allow their users to enjoy liquid staking.
Got it. Very cool. And then you guys are just taking that small fee off of that. So it's a near one-to-one exchange, which that jives pretty well with the other solutions out there as well. Like they're same thing. They're going to take a fee and you're going to get close to a one-to-one. Is that typical?
Yes, great question.
Okay.
Because we don't have traditional liquidity pools on Uniswap, and rather we have the ability to unstake the asset. For example, if you're holding a liquid staked Matic token and the utilization on TenderSwap is extremely high, you can think of this as a lot of people trying to swap out instantly, then maybe you'll elect to simply unstake your asset. So that means you click unstake on the Tenderize dashboard. 48 hours later, you'll unstake your Matic one-to-one. So your principal plus your rewards. And because of the ability to unstake, then we can treat each and every liquid stake derivative as one-to-one. So it's really unique in that sense where you're never going to be subject to the risk of a depegged liquid stake derivative. So if you remember, like late last summer, for a couple of months, staked ETH was trading at a significant discount. And that is a phenomenon that's not present in the Tenderize model simply because the user can unstake the asset directly.
Got it. Now, is that because Matic doesn't have a staking time lock to it, or is it
It's
because of what you
because
guys are doing?
it's because of the underlying network. So that's just the rule of the underlying network. So for example, with Matic, it's around 48 hours. Live peer is around 7 days, and the graph is closer to 28.
Got it. So if I unstake mine as an end user, do I wait that 28 days in the case of graph still, or
Yes.
I do?
So no matter what, whether you stake through Tenderize or you stake directly to an indexer
Mhm.
on the graph's main explorer, you will still be subject
Got
to
it.
the same.
That's what I expected. I thought I might be starting to hear something different. That's why I wanted to verify. So that makes sense. So you're also going to be adding ETH at some point as an option. Is that right?
Yes. We're hoping for Q1 of next year to be live with our ETH solution.
Okay. And what does it take to do that? What are the hurdles between where you are right now and having ETH live? What are the steps you have to go through to make that happen?
We need to create a design that basically solves that queue dilemma. So right now, it takes over a month of sitting in that queue in order to actually get your ETH in a position where it starts earning yield. So
And
we
that
have
changes over time, right? That's just a month now. It could be 6 weeks or
exactly,
2 weeks down the road a little bit.
exactly.
Okay.
We hope that it decreases, but there's also a couple EIPs in the mix. Some that are proposing that we increase the upper bound of how much ETH can be staked per node. Because originally that was kept so low to encourage decentralization. But we're finding that the trade off of that is people are using liquid staking solutions that are aggressively centralizing the underlying network.
Mm-hmm.
So, what was originally designed to protect the decentralization attributes are now one of the key bottlenecks that are encouraging decentralization by forcing individuals to use liquid staking solutions
Got it. And adding
that
an
funnel
additional
stake into their value.
protocol in between that's allowing for that too. So it's almost like taking that out of the hands of of Ethereum.
So we would love to do like a Lido type approach where there is a queue, but what we have to figure out is the exact logic of how the validators are selected. They can select which validator they'd like to go to, but it's primarily like incentivizing that asset as it sits in the queue.
Mm-hmm.
That would be one mechanism to like mimic liquid staking as it's still in the queue so they can earn some yield. But there's a lot of design space that could be explored when figuring out an optimal liquid staked ETH solution. But we are just going to keep our eyes on the market over the next couple of months. And in the meantime, we're going to prove out the idea with some of these longer tail assets and really build out a flourishing liquid stake derivative DeFi ecosystem. So focus on TenderSwap, focus on our stable coin. And then once all of that is really flushed out, we hope by that time the Ethereum liquid staking landscape will have a bit more clarity. And then we can launch that in early Q1 of next year. And we'll already have become experts of liquid staking as well as LST stablecoins.
Got it. Very cool. So there's a lot going on there from a design standpoint, things still to be figured out. What does the team
Yes.
look like to enable something like this? Like how many engineers do you have? What different skill sets do you have on staff that you need to do something like this?
Yeah, a lot of it is heavy math. And so we have 3 engineers on the team, 2 Solidity, and then 1 is technically Solidity, but he's more of a math guy. So the 3 of them are tackling most of the build out. And then I'm working very closely on tokenomics and incentives. But a lot of the math, specifically like pricing curves around like how much slippage do we charge depending on what the utilization is in the pool, and then considering what is the unlock of each asset, that math is a little bit outside of my wheelhouse. So we have one full-time stats and math individual, and then 2 full-time engineers.
Got it. And then what else? What's the supporting crew beyond that? Obviously, you're doing a lot of the growth and marketing and things like that. Is there other support happening around that engineering team?
Yeah, for sure. I'm a firm advocate that just because you build something doesn't mean that anyone gives a shit.
Nope.
So
They don't.
as we're building, I'm simultaneously sharing the word on various like kind of media publications, doing podcasts, etc. But then simultaneously, we've already talked to 120 different validators on these three networks. So we're hammering the airwaves,
Mhm.
talking with every single validator, every single staker that is willing to talk with us. And we want to get them to become power users of the protocol on launch day. So the two key profiles there are staking service providers that want to offer liquid staking to their customers. And then two, these larger delegates that are interested in participating in a new emerging liquid staking ecosystem. And we have a full-time business developer and COO that is tasked with building out that Genesis cohort.
Mhm.
And then we also have a CMO who's working on Twitter, writing blogs, and just telling the story, because there's so many moving parts
Mhm.
that even when you do an educational session, it's going to take a few times for everyone to really understand the various nuances of all these different products within
Yeah.
our ecosystem.
Right on. And that goes back to what I said earlier too, is you got to gain trust in people. And you're not going to gain trust if you don't look the part, if you don't look professional, if you're not constantly showing up in
Mhm.
spaces and podcasts and the website looks good and professional. Like all of that stuff needs to be happening simultaneously to good, solid development and auditing and security and everything else. So yeah, definitely to the teams out there that are listening, don't neglect that stuff. Don't wait till the end. It needs to be happening all along in
Can I
close
add something
coordination.
to that real
Please.
fast? So you and I have talked about this a lot, how the user profile is so different between bear markets and bull markets.
Hmm.
So right now, this kind of DeFi native crowd, which still exists in crypto in the depths of this bear market, they're okay with things like putting their money into a protocol with an anonymous founder, right? Because these are crypto native individuals. They've been holding ETH for years.
Yep,
They're
they're
used
used
to
to it.
this,
Yep.
right? But Tenderize chose an ecosystem that is much more kind of Web3 infrastructure service provider related. And those are proper businesses. They're not DeFi protocols. They have they have boards, they have executive teams, and they have mandates that they have to follow. It's not this Wild West world that we're used to. So, with that being said, we want to help onboard the future user.
Hmm.
And those future users will be extremely intimidated if they don't know who they're talking to, if they're engaging with all this goofy stuff, which is crypto Twitter. Um,
Yep.
so, long story short, that stuff flies today, but we think as retail re enters the market, they're going to prefer solutions where there are a doxed founding team where they can know that they can go and talk with these founders face to face if they'd like. It's not some character that you don't even know their first name.
Right on. I totally agree with that. And I think there'll continue to be that niche space where where that is what the customer expects and maybe even wants, to have that crypto native, undoxed, yeah, sure monkey, here's my $25,000. Like
Exactly.
there'll still be a place for that, but I'm with you. If you want to grow and expand beyond that core crypto audience and get out of the Wild West, there's going to be a certain level of professionalism required to do so. And I mean, it's trade-offs, right? If you want to stay in the Wild West, you can continue to do that. But if you want to come over here, you're probably going to have to just behave like a normal company and start to do some of these things that traditional crypto Twitter might frown on. But it is what it is. So I think it's good for a founder to be thinking about that. Where do you want to go at the end of the day? Do you want to build something that's going to grow and be attractive to normies? Then these are the things you should be thinking about right now. Bottom line. So good advice.
Totally. And they're definitely not mutually exclusive. I'm not suggesting that I'm going to attempt to direct all strategy decisions of the Tenderize protocol. I'm the CEO of Tenderize Labs. We built the open source infrastructure, but the infrastructure is governed and controlled by the token holders. So at the end of the day, a lot of these individuals that are conducting business in an anonymous way is because they're actually maintaining radical control of the protocol. And their token may or may not end up being a security because of all of the various
Okay.
centralization that is present in their protocol. So I'm choosing to dox myself because I'm confident that what we're building has no backdoor. There is no ability for me to move user capital. So that's why I feel comfortable doxing myself, because at the end of the day, I'm not the guy who's the success of Tenderize is not solely on my shoulders or on the shoulders of the founding team. We built it. We'll kickstart the thing. But at the end of the day, I'm just one of many community members here. Other community members are doxed. Why shouldn't I be?
Got it. Yeah, that's an important distinction too, because we are still operating in a very uncertain regulatory environment. And you got to protect yourself too in the long run if you want to do some of this experimentation and everything else. Like you said, you don't want to find out later that, oh, now the rules are out and I am officially a security and I broke them and now I'm going to court, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so I could totally understand that. And I am in no way, shape, or form like looking down on or disparaging the folks that do that. Like they're the ones that work has enabled us to do what we're talking about here, right? There would be no possibility of transition to normies and the broader economy because none of this stuff would exist. Yeah, I just want to make sure that
Couldn't
I'm
agree
being clear
more.
on that. That stuff's awesome. I love it. That's actually why I'm here too, is because of how much fun all of that was and continues to be. But yeah, we're just talking about this transition forward, some of the things to think about. So looking ahead here, you guys got V2 coming out. One last thing I want to touch on a little bit. We talked whole bunch of lessons in here for a founder thinking about how they can interact with the community, gain trust, all that. I'm curious, do you guys have anything in this protocol that you see where it becomes a tool for another founder that's doing something completely differently? Obviously, if somebody wants to add Liqud Staking into their economy, if you will, that's a direct one. But is there anything else that you see in here that becomes a tool for a founder elsewhere? Anything you guys thinking about?
Yeah, for sure. One of our core protocols or products inside of the Tenderize ecosystem is something that we call Beef Bank. And the Beef Bank is a system of smart contracts that will give you a loan against your stake. So if you think of liquidity, that means you can either sell your token or it means you can borrow against your token. So if you have a little bit more of a risk tolerance, or if you are say, a business that has a lot of retained earnings in these various tokens, you can think of staking businesses like this. Sometimes cash flow management is a little bit tricky to forecast, and you don't really know when these expenses are going to come up. So, say hypothetically, there's a large expense that you weren't ready for, and if you don't have enough liquidity on hand, you'll have to sell some of your assets. And if you're down on those assets, you really don't want to sell them.
Mm-hmm.
So these individuals can use Beef Bank to park their stake into a smart contract that will be locked up. Then the smart contract will give you stable coins. The stable coins are a loan against your stake. So let's just use some really easy math real fast. Say you put in $50,000 worth of staked GRT into Beef Bank. You could take a loan up to about $25,000. You will have a liquidation price. That means if the value of your collateral, which is the staked GRT, goes down to that price, anyone in the market can close your position, liquidate you, you keep the loan, and then they take your collateral. So
Okay.
this is extremely important because it just gives the liquidity to people that otherwise wouldn't have any means to pay their bill. They would have to sell their principal. But now you can take a loan and you can actually use the rewards from your collateral to pay down the loan.
Got it. So almost like a self-repaying loan, provided you stay
Exactly.
above that liquidation mark. You just got to wait.
Precisely. And
Okay.
we're even allowing for the end user to specify how they would like their stablecoin experience to look. And you can have it as where you would like to accept your rewards liquid in your wallet. Sure. This is like the Libra approach. Hold a stablecoin or an auto yield. Or you can hold your stablecoin and get yield in the stablecoin. So as your collateral grows in value, the protocol can actually mint you more stable coins to reflect the interest rate of your collateral going up. So
Got it.
the user will get some cool kind of additional benefits when using Beef Bank just on top of the liquidity itself.
Okay, very cool. So somebody might be able to, someone's sitting on some GRT or something they can stake, maybe they can pull some liquidity out, use to build their project, say a little self-loan. Okay,
Yep.
very cool. Lots of neat stuff coming. Really appreciate the time and explaining all of this to me here today. So where can the listener go if they want to learn more about Tenderize and what's available now and where you guys are headed?
Yeah, for sure. So tenderize.me is our website, and there you can find the explainer video, you can find the link to our white paper, you can find all the overviews and explainers that you might want. So that is where you can find all of our information. You can follow us on Twitter at tenderize_me. You can follow me personally on Twitter. It's Chef Alec. And then all of the communications over the next couple of months will be building up for our version 2 mainnet launch. As mentioned, version 1 is on chain today. Go check version 1 out, click around with it if you'd like. You may even get an extra airdrop if you do. But looking forward to version 2, we'll have a testnet live later in August. Our mainnet launch will happen early October. And then we're going to have our token generation event in November. So I'll save all the details for once they're finally actually public. But let's just say that expect details around a version 1 airdrop, a version 2 airdrop, and as well as additional staking incentives for the first 3 years. So I'll be publishing a TGE and a go-to-market blog later this month, giving all of the cool opportunities to get involved and to begin earning some of our governance token, Wagyu.
Awesome. Thank you again, man. This has been awesome. Alec Shaw, tenderize.me, Liqud Staking for the future. Appreciate what you guys are building, and thank you for coming to share.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Ready Layer 2. If you're an Arbitrum builder with a story to share, then hit me up on Twitter at GitSmall, GITSMOL. Learn more at gitsmall.com.